This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
I'm Shanice O'Mara at Imperial College in London, finding out how recycling plastic waste may only be part of the solution.
And I'm Zhao in Beijing, meeting the scientists battling plant viruses.
The 20th and 21st centuries have been dubbed the plastics age. Such is the influence and reach of this family of materials. We clean our teeth with plastic toothbrushes, type on plastic keyboards, drink and eat from plastic packaging. It's impossible to go through a day without encountering plastic of some kind. 14% of all plastic is said to be recycled, but in fact only 2% is truly circular. 32% makes its way into nature, ending up as microplastics or nanoplastics, which pollute our oceans, air and bodies. It's this fugitive plastic that Neil Dunn has set his sights on. He's CEO of Poly-materia, the startup behind a new biodegradable plastic.
Since the 1950s, the mass production of plastic has led to billions of tons of waste. Every year, almost a third of all plastic made ends up in the natural environment, and it can stay there for hundreds, if not thousands of years. It's a real problem. I've come to Imperial College in White City to meet a startup who claim to have found a solution. So we have a problem with plastic. We create a lot of it, and we don't really recycle enough of it. How are you addressing those issues?
Firstly, by focusing in on pure materials, so materials that do have a chance of returning to nature, but redesigning them at point of manufacture. So the three things that we do to change those materials fundamentally are, firstly, understanding how you destroy the hard crystalline part of the plastic structure. That's really important, because if you don't do that, you create microplastic, and that's why other attempts have failed. You then, to everyday people like me and you, create a wax or a grease. That's what it feels like in the kind of the early stage. You have to make that grease or wax attractive to nature. So the second thing we do is we add a prebiotic aspect, so that what is a carbon or a wax, microbes, fungi and bacteria see that as attractive, and they attack it and assimilate it, and that's how you get full biodegradation.
Okay, so I get it now. The penny's dropped. You are addressing a problem where you know that the plastic will eventually end up in nature, and you're saying, okay, we know it's going to end up being fugitive. Let's address that problem.
Exactly.
So does all of that science happen here?
Everything happens right underneath our feet, so why don't we go see them now?
Poly-materia are initially targeting polyolefins, which are the types of plastic that most likely end up in nature. Polyolefins include polyethylene, which is used to make plastic bags and packaging, and polypropylene, used to make plastic cups, cutlery, bottle caps and food containers.
I'm about to meet Florence Wynn, a biochemist that's helped to develop Poly-materia's novel plastic, and see exactly how it works. Hi, Florence.
Oh, hello, Shanae. Let me just grab your lab coat.
How are we for masks?
As long as we socially distance, then we can take it off.
Okay. Wow. So what do we have here?
So here you have a film without our technology.
Okay, so this is the typical plastic that we all use today.
Yes, exactly. So here you have microplastics.
Okay, so this is what typically happens when the plastics that we've all been using break down in the environment.
Yes, exactly. And then that ends up in the river and then finally in the ocean.
The Poly-materia technology uses a commercially sensitive additive containing around a dozen different components, including oils, rubbers and desiccants or drying agents, which is mixed in with conventional polymers at the manufacturing stage of plastic packaging.
So why is your material different?
So when a plastic containing our technology ends up in the natural environment, it will be converted into a wax that is bioavailable.
I love that word, bioavailable.
Okay.
I don't know, it just sounds so good for the environment.
Yes, well, it is.
So why is it good? Because plastic comes from hydrocarbons. Why is it good that this material is available?
What the technology does is that it breaks down those very long chain of molecules into a very shorter chain of molecules that also have specific chemical functions on it that are called carbonide functions, and that what makes microbes recognize it as a food source.
Wow, okay, so you're saying that plastic can actually be food for organisms?
Yes, exactly.
Before we find out how plastic can become a harmless food source, we need to know how it's made. It starts with crude oil, which contains long-chain hydrocarbon molecules. When distilled in a refinery, the oil is separated into fractions, which are a mixture of hydrocarbon chains. One of these fractions, naphtha, is the crucial compound used in plastics. Its long chains are diluted with steam and briefly heated in a hot furnace to crack the chains into smaller molecules. A catalyst is added that links the molecules together to form polymers called resins. These are shaped into pre-production pellets known as nurdles and transported to manufacturers. The nurdles are then heated and moulded into different types of plastic products. It's during this process the commercially sensitive Poly-materia additive is introduced. In the presence of light, air and moisture, it breaks the hard crystalline structure into a wax-like substance of short-chain molecules containing carbon atoms double bonded to an oxygen atom. These are called carbonyl functions, and microbes latch onto these double bonds, converting the wax into food, carbon dioxide and water, leaving no microplastics behind. They're calling the process biotransformation.
What I want to see is the actual weathering machine, because the idea that you can squash 3 months of environmental kind of conditions into 14 days sounds fascinating.
They're just here at the back. We have plenty here to do our testing. Here you are just one that finished. Here you have a film that doesn't have our technology, and here you have a film that has our technology in. So you can feel and touch it. Very brittle.
Yes. So this is what actual plastic does today. It just stays the way it's always been.
Yes, exactly.
Whereas your material is visibly different. It looks like it's just flaking into, it's a bit like rice paper.
Because it's not a plastic anymore, and it got converted into a wax. We do some fancy chemical analysis of that to make sure it is actually a wax.
So is there a place where we can actually see the analysis that you do?
Yes, of course. I'll take you to the analysis lab. So let's go. We make sure this is a wax by analyzing how long the molecules are, and also make sure that we have those carbonide functions essential for microbes to recognize it as a food source. So we've placed the material here on this machine, and then we'll just run an analysis. So here you can see a huge peak here, and that means that our wax has a lot of those carbonide functions.
What's this?
So this is a label we put on our products, and that just shows customers that they can recycle our product.
Poly-materia products will have a use-by date printed on them, or rather a recycle-by date. Through their weathering experiments, they've worked out how much additive is needed to set exactly when the catalyst kicks in to start breaking down the material, allowing manufacturers to tailor it for their product depending on the required lifespan. After the recycle-by date, the product no longer behaves like a plastic. Florence demonstrates by attempting to recycle both conventional plastic and their product after it's been weathered.
So this is what recycled plastic looks like.
Yes. Now, if we look at what's been weathered outdoors, and we try to do the exact same thing.
This is polymateria now.
Okay, I can just redo.
So this is, what we're about to see is An attempt to recycle polymateria.
Yes, an attempt to recycle it after it spent some time outdoors. What we should see is that we can't recycle it back into that piece of plastic because it's not a plastic anymore. So here, you just see there's nothing there because you see it's just a bit liquid wax.
It's very hard to imagine that it won't leave some trace.
So the wax itself, when it's at that stage, is not toxic at all to the organisms we've tested. We've tested, the main ones to represent the aquatic environment and the terrestrial environment. So we've tested earthworm, daphnias. We've also tested if they had any impact on germinations of seed. And then we went on also testing that wax for biodegradation. So we made sure that wax would be consumed by microbes and be converted into CO2, and that we would leave no wax behind.
So far, there's been a lot of interest from brands that would like to make their products more environmentally friendly. And with just 20 companies responsible for producing 55% of the world's single-use plastic, they hope to cut through the greenwash and make real change by introducing polymateria technology to a wide range of product manufacturing pipelines.
Unlike climate change, where we have 10 to 15 years of policy, innovation, capital, all kind of pulling in the same direction, on plastic pollution, it was only in 2017 that David Attenborough really raised awareness on this issue and created almost a populist response to it. And there's been a lot of, yes, awareness on the problem itself, but innovation on plastic pollution is not yet at the stage of maturity that maybe we have on climate change. So it's just a question of time.
You can see more of Razor on our YouTube channel. Search for Razor Science Show and it will take you straight there. Remember to subscribe and hit the bell button for notifications.
Facing the unknown is always difficult. In a world in turmoil, it's easy to lose orientation. But when the storms come, we have to see the possibilities, reinvent, find new opportunities, discover a path forward. CGTN, see the difference.
On the agenda with me, Stephen Cole, we look up into space. We look down into data. We look at debt. We look at politics. We look at opioids, climate change. We look at all the issues that really matter around the world. But you matter too. We want to tell the stories you want to see and hear about. Make it your agenda.
The community of viruses is extremely vast, occupying every imaginable biological niche, and animals are not the only victims. I'm Zhao in Beijing to meet some plant scientists who are using the natural defense mechanisms of plants as the means of viral control.
就是自然界存在大概1000多种这样的植物病毒，那么严重的时候呢，会导致整个的这个大面积的绝产。那么现在已经成为了我们在农业中所面临的第二大的病害。
In most cases, insects are accomplices. A bite on the delicious, juicy leaves can open the gate for those invaders.
我们现在采用的方法呢，往往是用一些农药去杀死这些传播病毒的昆虫。到目前为止，我们并没有找到任何一个有效的这个农药或者化学试剂能够把病毒从植物体内清除掉。
Plants can't always hide so easily, but it doesn't mean efforts to prevent viruses are doomed to fail.
那么病毒呢，它总是能够想到办法去侵染植物的这各种组织，但是呢，只有一个组织是例外的，那么这个组织就是茎尖。
All the way up the stem at the terminal of the plant is the shoot tip. Since the 1950s, people have realized this tiny part of the plant is unaffected, not by just a few viruses, but by a wide range of them. The science behind it is still unclear, but farmers know that as long as they reserve the shoot tip, they can always cultivate new plants without passing on the virus. In Professor Zhao's lab, efforts to review this mystery are underway. Scientists are rubbing the leaves to make wounds, allowing a virus to invade.
那么这种黑色的这种区域，就是显示是有病毒的位置。
Under the microscope, an epic battle unfolds. The virus takes over from leaf to stem, engulfing every corner within the body of the plants. After about 8 days, most of the plants have been infected, but one last section remains untouched.
就是病毒所停在的位置，恰好是在一个调控干细胞维持的一个非常重要的基因的下面，它就再也不能突破这个区域了。
那么这个干细胞在什么地方呢？这个干细胞呢，它就在茎尖的中间。
Stem cells have a unique ability to transform themselves into a various specialized cells that make up the plant. New roots, leaves, flowers, and everything else originate from stem cells. So a plant equips its shoot tip with an important protein.
干细胞是植物最值得保护的和最后保护的一群细胞。如果植物连这群细胞都保护不了的时候呢，那么植物生命就结束了。所以说，对于干细胞来说呢，它有非常强的这种强大的抗这个外界不利环境的因素，当然包括这个病毒。
Viruses stop at the territory belonging to a specific protein of the stem cell called Wushell. Scientists have realized it's not just a coincidence. If the plant's shoot tip is the last fortress, Wushell is the soldiers to defend it.
在正常情况下呢，乌手蛋白它只在干细胞内，那么是非常这个局限的一个范围。但是当病毒来了以后，那么它的表达量呢会上升。
When the enemy is at the gate, the defending troops march out to break the assault.
病毒感染第9天的时候，就发现它还迁移到了向两边迁移到了这个周边区的位置，几乎占满了整个分生组织。
As scientists artificially push the Wushell protein forward, the virus retreats. They moved the Wushell to the leaf, where the virus initially invaded, and found it protected the whole plant. But once the Wushell protein is removed, the plant is soon engulfed by the virus, even up the shoot tip.
那么在以前的研究中呢，我们只发现了呢，它是维持干细胞所必须的。就是如果说没有这个蛋白，干细胞是不能维持的。我们从来不知道这个蛋白它还有参与抗病毒这样的能力。
Viruses survive by replicating. Proteins are raw material. But the virus structure is too simple to generate any protein on its own, so it has to do so in truly living cells.
当病毒进入细胞以后呢，它就会劫持细胞内所有的蛋白质合成系统，来为它自己服务。
That's what makes them dangerous, but it's also their weakest point.
对，这是近年的区域。这个绿色的荧光是我们标记的新生的蛋白质的量。这个都有绿色就表示整个细胞它都是正常的，就是每个细胞都在正常的合成蛋白质。蛋白质的量就是我们能够直观的看清。我们就是把乌手这个蛋白诱导表达之后，就发现我们看不到新生蛋白质的量了。这就说明乌手的过量表达抑制了蛋白质的合成。
Plants are smart enough to control the protein levels to combat the virus, while at the same time being able to satisfy their minimum demand to keep the stem cells alive.
来把这个体内的蛋白质合成系统把它降低，降到一个非常低的水平。那么这个时候呢，你不管什么病毒进来，你都不能够来复制自己，不能够进行下一步的传播。那么我们这次看到呢，实际上就是一个植物的天然的一个抗病毒免疫的一个机制，但是很可惜它只在这个非常小的这个茎尖内存在。那么当然我们希望能够把这个机制能够把它放大到植物的这个叶片里头，我们就能够保护整株植物不被病毒侵染。 那么通过转基因以后呢，这套系统就会稳定的存在在种子里头。那么这样它每一代呢，这种系统呢，这种防御系统都是存在的。
For more science, behind-the-scenes insights, groundbreaking research, and even some fun, check out our Razor podcast. Search Razor Sounds on all major streaming platforms, and remember to subscribe so you don't miss out on any episodes.
The world economy as we know it is about to change. Global business reports highlight emerging markets, developing countries, and dynamic sectors worldwide. We feature top analysts and newsmakers to provide perspectives on every facet of business. From an on-the-ground perspective, we provide you with balanced and objective assessments. Fast, sharp, and insightful. Global Business. Only on CGTN.
The climate of planet Earth is an extraordinarily complex system of interconnected forces. The sun is the main driver of this, and its intensity affects global winds, precipitation patterns, and ocean circulation. Massive ocean currents such as the Gulf Stream move heat from one part of the planet to the other, and in part helps to give Western Europe its mild winter climate. Climate change is already having a visible effect on the world, and scientists are starting to build a clearer picture of what happens when certain climate components near their tipping point. Dr. Levke Caesar is part of an international team from the UK, Ireland and Germany that are looking at one of the largest ocean currents, known as the AMOC.
AMOC, or short AMOC, is the Atlantic Meridional Overturning circulation, and it is basically defined by an overturning of water masses. Surface flow, or a near surface flow, of warm and saline water masses that go from the low latitudes towards the North Atlantic, and there these water masses sink, and we have a colder return flow at depth.
I'm visualizing a complex system of cogs and gears, and the AMOC seems to be quite a large cog in this machine. I mean, how influential is it globally?
The AMOC is basically the bridge between the two hemispheres, because it's actually transporting heat from the southern towards the northern hemisphere, and this exchange of warm and cold water leads to a large heat transport by the AMOC that can be as large as about 1.3 petawatts, which is about the energy produced by 1 million medium-sized nuclear power plants. This energy is at some point released to the atmosphere, and that is how the AMOC influences our climate.
And so why has it been brought to your attention? Why are you doing research on it now?
We know that in principle it is possible for the AMOC to stop or even reverse direction. Climate data points towards the fact that this has happened in the past, and so for us it's of course important to know, can this happen again, and can it even happen within our lifetime?
In 2004, the RAPID programme was started by the researchers worried about rapid climate change. A series of moorings were installed between the Bahamas and the Canary Islands. Each mooring stretches from the seabed to the ocean surface and has up to 270 instruments measuring the temperature, salinity and depth at which the observations are made. The tallest mooring is 5,150 metres high, 17 times the Eiffel Tower. These provide detailed measurements of ocean currents from which scientists can build a picture of the AMOC's activity. For data prior to 2004, Dr. Caesar and her team had to be more creative, using data gathered from natural environmental archives such as sediment and ice and coral, as well as from historical data such as ship logs.
The ocean sediment acts kind of like a memory. All the different plants and animals that die in the ocean, they would sink to the ground, and then they would just form layer after layer and giving us a record of time going back. We looked at data that can go back over 1,000 years, even nearly 2,000 years, and therefore kind of record the water temperatures and the flows that have been there.
Looking at these paleoclimatic records led to some uncomfortable conclusions.
We could see that for most of the time, the AMOC has been very stable with some natural variability, but overall very stable. And only in the midst or towards the end of the 19th century, the AMOC started to weaken and a more rapid decline then followed in the 20th century. The overall picture is that over the last decades, the AMOC has been in a very weak state compared to the last nearly 2,000 years.
What do you think is driving this change?
Under global warming, we have a lot of freshwater flux into the subpolar North Atlantic because of the melting of the Arctic sea ice and the Greenland ice sheet. And we also have this warming of the surface waters, and both fresher water, that is less saline, and warmer water is less dense than cold saline water. And this inhibits then the sinking of water masses in the North Atlantic, which is basically one of the drivers of the AMOC.
Does the research reveal anything that we should be concerned about? Because change is inevitable, right?
Well, I mean, there's this, I guess, by now famous saying that climate has always changed for the Earth or on Earth, and that is true, but the AMOC has been stable for a very, very long time. And in that sense, we humans are adapted to it, but not just we humans, like the whole marine ecosystem of the Atlantic is adapted to the current being there. We know if it gets weaker, this could enhance the sea level rise at US East Coast cities like New York or Boston. A weaker AMOC is linked to enhanced storminess over the North Atlantic, so this could worsen winter storms for northwestern Europe. There also seem to be links to the AMOC and the position of weather patterns in the Northern Hemisphere.
That's quite a scary set of outcomes, and there are many more unknowns of what will happen if it reaches its tipping point.
There are some parts of the climate system that can be fairly stable and behave what we call linearly for a long time period, meaning that if we stop global warming now, the AMOC will likely recover. But once the AMOC has reached or gone beyond its tipping point, then even if we reverse the forcing, it will continue to weaken. And that we know can happen, but the problem is we don't know when exactly it will happen. And that could, if we are unlucky, be really, really close to nowadays. Could be a little bit farther away, but we don't know. And as I said, once we cross this tipping point, there is no going back for a very, very long time.
I'm not sure whether to be absolutely terrified of our future or hopeful that we're aware of this huge impact.
Oh, I don't know. I mean, basically, we're learning, and we're learning, I guess, every day new things, but I guess sometimes, when you know more about a system, you also realize how much there is that you still don't know. And it is hopeful in the sense that we do know about it now, and right now is a time where we can still act. So that is hopeful. But the other thing, I guess, would be looking at, okay, how is climate politics done right now? And that, at the moment, still doesn't look extremely helpful to me because we're not acting fast enough.